Managing student behavior is a challenge, regardless of the setting, but managing scores of children while driving a 13-ton vehicle presents a challenge not everyone can handle successfully. On top of that, there's a rising concern about school violence and the safety of our students and employees. There is hope and movement to turn around the staggering rise of youth violence. As educators, we refuse to feel hopeless, and it's not in our collective or personal nature to feel hopeless. As we learn more strategies in student discipline, we take yet another step in the process to detect and prevent school violence. On February 11, 1988, while working at a Florida high school as an assistant principal, Dr. Nancy Blackwelder, a fellow administrator and a teacher, fell victim to 2 gun-wielding students, which rocked the educational community. After her recovery, she recognized the need to evaluate school districts' training programs and use the knowledge gained through her experience to help other educators. Dr. Blackwelder is an articulate speaker with experience as a teacher and as an assistant principal at both the elementary and high school levels, an assistant director of transportation, and an administrator in the special needs student education department. Tomorrow, we hope that you'll return to your jobs and use the strategies you learned today and feel that powerful sense of assurance that comes when you know you have the tools in place to ensure that your buses and schools are safe and happy havens for everyone.
Although special needs students are categorized by certain IQ, behavioral, and physical indicators, students within each category can vary widely. After all, they are individuals. The more you know about each category, the more effective you'll be in customizing your student management plan. This next section will give you some general characteristics of the students and strategies to make their bus rides successful. We will also discuss the importance of confidentiality of student records. The ADA is a wide-ranging civil rights law that prohibits, under certain circumstances, discrimination based on disability. It affords similar protections against discrimination to Americans with disabilities as the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, which made discrimination based on race, religion, sex, national origin, and other characteristics illegal. So what is a disability? A disability is defined by the ADA as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. We need to work on getting people-first language when we're dealing with people with disabilities. Disability labels focus on what individuals cannot do rather than the person's abilities. People-first language looks at the individual before the disability. A disability is something that an individual has, not what an individual is. So, some examples of people-first language. Adam is a young boy with cerebral palsy, not a CP boy. Jason is a 13-year-old with a learning disability, not a learning disabled teen. Alex is a kindergartner that has autism, not an autistic kindergartner. A family has a son with Down syndrome, not a Down's son. Lacey uses a wheelchair, not a wheelchair-bound girl. So let's look at our first category of mentally disabled children.
Most parents assume their kids are safe in the care of their teachers. But when videos like this surface, it just makes you wonder what's happening at your child's school.
Although is he younger than Justin? Wow.
Disturbing behavior caught on a school bus camera in Darlington, South Carolina. 2 women, One, a teacher's assistant, the other, a behavioral manager, abusing a mentally handicapped student while trying to strap him into a safety harness. The 10-year-old student can't speak. He was totally helpless. The bus driver, who did nothing to defend the boy, turned the video over to school officials who called the cops. Both women are charged with assault and battery. Maybe they'll find someone their own size to pick on, if they ever make it to prison.
So let's look at the characteristics of a mentally disabled student. Well, they may have a low tolerance for frustration. They may have poor self-direction skills. I indicated earlier that I have two mentally handicapped children of my own. And my oldest daughter, Carrie, used to be a bus assistant and a teacher assistant in a pre-K handicap class. And she did a marvelous job. The bus drivers just loved her. She would sit there and read the little pre-K kids' stories on the bus. She attended to them, put them in their harnesses. But when she got into the classroom, she had a longer period of time in the classroom throughout the day. And this whole business of poor self-direction skills, after the first couple weeks of work, she was ready to quit, and the teachers were ready to get rid of her. And so I asked the lady in charge of mentally handicapped students in our district to go talk with the teachers and find out just what the problem is, because she was doing so well on the bus and yet having difficulty as a classroom assistant. And as it turns out, what the supervisor told the teachers to do is to make a schedule for Carrie. At 9 o'clock, you get out the treats. At 9:15, you get out the cots. At 9:30, you clean up from the treats. At 10 o'clock, the kids go down for naps. So you see, Carrie knew what was expected of her to do the very next thing, and she was totally happy with that. I know on my watch at 9 o'clock, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I know at 9:15, this is what I'm supposed to do. Now, if the teachers gave her 15 minutes to put the snacks out and it only took her 10, you couldn't really expect that she was going to look around for the next 5 minutes and see what else it was that she could do, because she doesn't have those good self-direction skills. They may be overly aggressive or affectionate or impulsive. With my two girls, Carrie would be the one that is an overly aggressive child. Kristen, on the other hand, is very affectionate, very baby-like in her whole demeanor, wants to hold your hand, wants to put her head on your shoulder, those kinds of things. They may have trouble with abstract concepts. So what's an abstract concept? Well, a concrete concept is something like chair. I can touch it, I can sit on it, I know its function. It's concrete, a chair, a bed, those kinds of things. An abstract concept is something like above or below, behind. Those aren't things you can touch and feel. It's a concept that you have to get in your head. So when you tell a child to get behind Sally and she gets in front of her, it could be, I know I'm supposed to be close to Sally, but I'm not really sure which side. And so sometimes when working with these kids, you need to give an example, physically show her where behind is. They may have poor short-term memory. They may exhibit non-age appropriate behavior, such as clinging and hugging. That would be my Kristen.
They use their fist.
They used their fist and they punched you?
Yes. Did it hurt?
Yes.
Ricardo Willis Jr. has largely recovered physically from the attack last week, but his father is still furious.
I'm very concerned about the safety of my son.
Willis says his 16-year-old spent long hours in the emergency room with a nasty black eye and scratches on his eye and face.
He told me that he had been hit twice in the eye by another student on the bus.
Willis is convinced that the attendant on the school bus stood by while his son was attacked and that she did nothing to stop it.
That he was assaulted. She let it happen intentionally and did nothing to prevent it, or didn't even come and notify me that anything had happened.
Willis says he complained to one supervisor after another. He says he was brushed off, and only now is one of the school's top officials promising that his mentally challenged son will be safe next time he gets on the school bus.
He cannot protect himself. He is very vulnerable.
You want to go back to school?
Yes.
You want to go back to school? You like school?
Yes.
When an employee of the District of Columbia allows my son to be victimized and then doesn't do anything about it, that goes to show against the fabric of what we have working for us in the District of Columbia.
So in that particular situation, you have a mentally handicapped child on the bus, and if you were the attendant on that bus, you certainly would be sitting near the child so that you could intercede. When my children, Carrie, when she was on a regular bus, she was mainstream, so she was riding a regular education bus. And I encouraged her to sit up front by the driver, where the driver could keep an eye on her and keep other children from picking on her. So what can the attendant do to help make these children's ride pleasant? Well, first of all, establish structure and routine. This is a concept that you're going to see throughout all these disabilities as far as the structure and routine. Because, for example, with a child that has processing deficits, like a child that has a mental disability, or even to a greater degree, kids with autism, they don't process information as quickly as the quote-unquote normal children. And when they're little ones, they don't really realize, nor do the other children, that they're having problems with processing deficits. But the older they get, not only do they recognize that they don't get things done as quickly as others, but the other children start recognizing that they aren't getting things done as quickly, and as children will be children, they'll start picking on them. So one of the defense mechanisms that the child will have in order to not be put in a position where they have to think on their feet is that sometimes they will get angry and blow up, and everybody steps back and gives them room, and it also gives them time to process the information. So anything that gives them structure and routine is a comfortable place for them, because they don't have to think on their feet. The bus comes at 9:05. I have the same bus driver that I say good morning to and that they say good morning back. I have the same bus attendant sitting in the same seat. I walk back to my seat, the very same seat every day. And that kind of structure and routine is a comfort level for these children so that they don't have to get caught thinking on their feet and have other children make fun of them because they just don't process the information as quickly as the others do. Give the child one direction at a time. With my children, if I came home and said to Carrie, Carrie, you can have a snack, and then I want you to make your bed, take out the trash, and put your clothes away, and then you can go out inside and play. This is what Carrie hears. Carrie, you can get a snack. She starts processing that information. She's thinking about the refrigerator, what's in the refrigerator, what would be good for a snack. And meanwhile, I have gone on to, I want you to make your bed, take out the trash, put away your clothes. I can see the look in her eye that she's like, wait, I hadn't finished processing the snack. And already you're moving on to other stuff, and I'm not getting it, and I'm starting to panic. And pretty soon she's not hearing much of nothing. And then I end up, and then you can go outside and play. followed by silence. Well, she has time to process. I can go outside and play. And so you guessed it. She'll hear you can get a snack and then go outside and play. And she misses all the stuff in the middle. So you have to be certain that you give these children one direction at a time. Multiple directions just won't work. Build self-confidence and promote pride for effort and good work. Provide frequent praise, more frequently than you would a normal child. Use repetition over and over and over. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Model for the child what it is you want him or her to do. Speak softly and firmly. If you yell at kids that have this deficit, you can just see their mind going blank. The adrenaline flies and they just stop processing things altogether. But as long as you can keep a calm, quiet voice and give directions, you'll have more success. And be friendly. So the next category we're dealing with is emotionally disabled children.
You picking up Dwight Smith? Stop, Yvonne! He took that foot! He didn't hit me in the face! Yvonne, he didn't mean to do that! He didn't mean to do it! Yes, he did! No, he didn't! He was... Yvonne! Get the fuck up! Yvonne! Stop! Don't fucking... Come on here! Fuck ass, let's go! Come on here! Come on here! Yvonne! Stop! Yvonne! Stop him! Yvonne! Stop! Yvonne! Stop! Yvonne! Stop! Yvonne! Yvonne, on that boy loose. Turn him loose. Cut the fuck off. Get him. Yvonne! Don't stop. Get on. Everything gotta go. He's about to go on charity bus. He picked Anthony up and threw him over the seat.
So what happened in this particular video clip? The bus attendant was arrested and charged with child abuse. 2 students were roughhousing on the bus when one of the students was flipped by the other, causing his foot to strike the bus attendant. The bus attendant then went after the 14-year-old boy who flipped the younger student. A video of the incident released shows that 70-year-old Branch punching the student and biting him twice on his back. She was arrested and was charged with child abuse. She was released after posting bond. The school district recommends she be fired, but she retired in lieu of termination. Based on the video, we determined that the bus attendant had acted outside the scope of her responsibility in taking an offensive posture towards the student in question on the bus. So there are 2 kinds of emotionally disabled behaviors. One, at one end of the spectrum, is withdrawing behaviors. And the student may suck their thumb, chew on pencils, or chew on clothing. They may not talk much at all. They may rock or exhibit other self-stimulating behaviors. They may attend more to animals or toys than to people. And they may sit and play alone. So what would the attendant do to deal with emotionally disabled withdrawing behaviors? Well, you want to assure success situations. Set them up for success. Don't force the student to interact with other students. Allow for informal conversation. So on the other end of the spectrum of emotionally disabled children, there are the acting out behaviors. And the student may be disruptive, talk without regard for others, may fail to listen, exhibit out-of-seat behaviors, may be easily distracted, hyperactive, or impulsive, may have frequent temper tantrums, may talk back, yell, or swear. So what should the attendant do? Well, in this case, provide opportunities for leadership. This may be a child that you ask to read a story to a younger child, or you may ask the child to be the one who puts the windows up at the end of a run. You try to pick out the behaviors that are more associated with safety and drill those in and day out, and ignore, if you can, some other inappropriate behaviors. These children need so much structure and so much repetition on those safety concerns that some things that aren't of a safety issue you might see if you can slide over, because you will be spending a lot of time working with them on the safety issues. Reduce auditory and visual stimulation. Well, that's pretty hard on a school bus with the noise the bus makes and the noise the children make. Best option there is to put them in a front seat by the window. Minimize rules and be consistent. So you're not going to throw 25 rules at these kids. You're going to pick the 2 or 3 rules that are most associated with safety and do the repetition, repetition, repetition. Give clear, concise directions. And use contract or contingency management. Most all children that are in emotionally handicapped classes within the school will have teachers that have a contract management system. When they're real little, it's like if you can be good for the next 30 minutes, you'll get a check. If you misbehave in the next 30 minutes, you get a minus. And they'll do that throughout the day, and at the end of the day, if the child has more checks than minuses, then they will get a reward. Well, you can talk with the teacher and you can get in on that checks and minus business, to where if they have a good day with you on the school bus, you can give them a little slip of paper signed with a check on it that they will take into their teacher, and that teacher will add that to the child's checks for the day. And then, of course, if you give them a minus, you know they probably aren't going to give it to the teacher, and the teacher already knows that, so they just say, if you don't bring me a paper, you get a minus. So buying into that teacher's contract management system might assist you with an emotionally acting out child on the bus. Our next category is the learning disabled. The student frequently does not look or act any different from any other child. Their special needs are not obvious. In large part, their IQ has a big difference between the IQ and the achievement, and that gets them into this learning disabled classroom. They may have a problem using or understanding language. They may require patience and understanding with written and oral communication, and they rarely require special transportation. So in large part, you're going to probably have kids that are in learning disabled classes mainstreamed onto regular buses. And because they don't look any different than any other child, then we may have expectations of their behavior to be like a quote-unquote normal child. And we have to remember that they indeed do have a disability, and we have to show that kind of patience with those children that we do with other kids whose disability is more obvious. They may be hyperactive, restless, forgetful, easily distracted. They may be upset when structure and routine are altered. They may be confused and unable to follow directions. They may have to have them repeated. And they may have immature speech. They may have trouble with abstract concepts, once again. And they may have difficulty relating to others. So what does the attendant need to do to assist these children? Well, number one, provide structure so the child doesn't have to think on their feet and worry about falling behind the other children. I identify reinforcers for the child. What is the child like, so that when you catch them doing something right, then you can give them a reward for it. Reward successes immediately. The closer the reward is to the success, the more effective you'll be. You need to recognize defense mechanisms the child may use. They may withdraw or they may blow up in an effort to disguise the fact that they don't understand. Restate instructions exactly. Rephrasing instructions may only confuse the child. When I'm dealing with my own child, with Carrie, for example, if you give them direction, it takes them a while to process the information. It takes longer than a quote-unquote normal child. With a normal child, there's an expectation that you would wait a full 5 seconds before you expect them to respond to you. 5 seconds is a really long time. Well, with a special needs student with processing deficits, it may take up to 8 to 10 seconds for them to process the information and respond to you. So what we do as adults is we get uncomfortable with that silence. And so we feel like we need to fill it up with something. Well, maybe they didn't understand the question. And so we try to figure out how we could restate it to make it more clear. And when you restate it, it seems like you're asking a whole different question. And I'll have my daughter, I'll ask her a question, and time will go by, and I'm waiting for a response, and so I'll try restating it and saying something else, and she'll get angry with me and say, well, which one do you want me to answer, the first question or the second? So be certain that if you are waiting and it doesn't seem as though they got the question, that you restate the question exactly. Be concrete in explanations. Provide positive feedback consistently and frequently. So our next category is communication disorders. So students with communication disorders, for example, that have cerebral palsy, are poorly coordinated speech resulting from an injury to the brain's motor control area. A child that has a cleft palate, speech may be distorted, resulting from an actual gap in the roof of the mouth. Students may have delayed language, slowness of speech development, often including deficiencies of vocabulary, sentence structures, and ideas. Kids may have poor articulation, substitution, omission, addition, or distortion of speech sounds. Stuttering, hesitations, repetitions, or prolongations of speech-related disorders and distortions of pitch, intensity, and quality. So what does the attendant do in working with children with communication disorders? Well, be consistent. Help the student feel that he or she belongs. Accept the student and show patience without pity. Don't embarrass the student. Model good language. You're not going to communicate better with them if you mimic the language they use. Give instructions that are clear, concise, and begin with limited steps. Build self-esteem through patience and understanding. You may find yourself with hearing impaired or deaf children. Well, they may ask you to repeat yourself. They may misunderstand what you say. They may mispronounce words. They may fail to respond when spoken to. They may daydream or be inattentive. They may have difficulty in getting along with other children. What I have found with hearing impaired children is when they're young, they don't realize that they're hearing impaired. They just roll with the punches and they're happy little kids. But the older they get, the more they realize what they're missing. And so they start to get that why me attitude of why is it I can't go to the movies like everybody else goes to the movies, enjoy them quite as much. And so sometimes you'll get into the middle school and early high school ages where they'll start to have some behavior problems because of this attitude. They may have difficulty differentiating between similar consonants like M's and N's and determining that enunciation, that articulation of the letters. They may lip read only, sign only, or both. So what would the attendant do to assist these children? Well, first you're going to sit the child where he or she can see your mouth. And if you're a man with a big bushy mustache, you might want to pull it back a little bit so they can see your lips. Speak distinctly, but don't over-exaggerate your language. You need to check for comprehension. When you've asked them to do something, you will ask them to tell you back. Now, what is it I just asked you to do? And if they can tell you back, then you know that they've gotten what you've asked. When giving directions, demonstrate. Physically demonstrate as though you were doing mime or signs. Get the student's attention before speaking to them. Learn a few purposeful hand signals. So it's really very easy to learn a few hand signals that will help you in dealing with children who use sign as their means of communication. What are some of the things you need the children to do on the bus? Well, you need them to sit. So 2 fingers, sit. You may want to speak to a boy or a girl. With a boy, it's a symbol like this. It's like you're touching your ball cap. With a girl, it's a symbol like this, which is related to girls wear bonnets, boys wear caps. Boy, girl. If you want to say a little boy, it's boy, little, or girl, little. If you're trying to reward them for their behavior, you would say good. So good girl, good boy. So if they're doing something bad, then you're going to say bad. And you say the word as well as do the hand signal, bad. So bad boy, bad girl. You might want to refer to their mom or their dad. So their mom is a symbol here, where their dad is a symbol here. Mom, dad. Once again, the bonnet and the cap. So if you want to thank a child for what they have done, you would just say, thank you. Thank you. Don't blow them a kiss. Thank you. You may want to differentiate between going to school and going home. School is this hand signal. School. If we're going home, you start here and move back. Going home. School. Home. If you want to apologize to a child, you would say sorry. Sorry. If you want a child to stop what they're doing, you would say stop. Stop. If you want them to be quiet, this one you got to know, shh. And if you want them to stop it and knock it off, you'd say stop, knock it off. Stop, knock it off. Our next category is autistic children. So what causes autism? Most cases of autism appear to be caused by a combination of autism risk genes and environmental factors influencing early brain development.
A Treasure Coast school bus aide is off the hook 4 months after an incident involving an autistic student.
Our Kathleen O'Toole spoke exclusively with the school bus aide and prosecutors about the decision not to press charges.
State would have to prove behind a reasonable doubt that this
School bus aide Patricia Davis recently learned prosecutors aren't filing criminal charges on her March 2010 child neglect arrest. The documents were showing her finally tell her why.
And her only other option was to go hands-on.
Davis has never spoken publicly about what happened on a St. Lucie County school bus when an autistic student in her care hit his head so many times against the window it broke and his head bled.
I didn't ignore that child. I didn't know what to do. I never had training with this child. I just had been on the bus. I didn't know nothing about this child.
Davis was arrested for not stopping the boy.
It made me feel real bad. I mean, they had me like I'm a pure criminal. I'm not a criminal.
It's bothersome. You would hope that someone would be able to stop the student from doing that. But it's also clear that she didn't know how to react and she didn't know what to do.
It was prosecutor Jason Bruin's decision not to file charges. He interviewed witnesses and looked at Davis's training, in the end concluding he could not prove a crime had been committed.
While I don't condone her inaction, it didn't rise to the level of a criminal act that I could prove beyond a reasonable doubt in court.
I've been out there going on 10 years, never been in trouble, never gave them a bit of trouble, never had a valuation to this year, bad valuation. That hurt me to my heart because people on the job saw me being arrested. And you know that's a big old compound, they gonna talk.
By all accounts, Davis did attempt to comfort the boy, giving him cookies and kind words. She says she even borrowed a cell phone to call his mother for help. A mother of 4 herself and grandmother of 10, Davis still has hope the school district will let her go back to work.
What do you do now?
Sitting home. Sitting home enjoying my grandchildren.
Right after the incident, Davis was transferred out of the bus away from school children, but she was still employed and still had a job. Now, over the summer, she is off. That's a standard matter of course for school bus aides. As for what will happen next school year, it's a bit unclear. The school board spokesperson telling me they are still investigating this incident. Reporting in Fort Pierce, I'm Kathleen O'Toole, WPBF 25 News.
So in this situation, the reason I showed you that clip was, in essence, the bus driver wanted to help the child, but just didn't have any training on how to deal with the behavior, which is what got her into trouble. So here's another headline. School bus aide 72 hurt disabled child. Here is another incident where the bus personnel acted inappropriately.
First at 4, a Volusia County school bus aide charged with child abuse.
Edgewater police say the attendant abused and threatened a 14-year-old autistic child. Watch 2's Claire Metz joins us live from New Smyrna Beach High School, where that boy attends school. And Claire, this woman's husband says the accusations couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what he says, indeed. The incident allegedly happened November 8th. The 14-year-old autistic child rides the school bus to and from New Smyrna Beach High School, and this allegedly occurred on the bus ride home back to Edgewater. Now, the boy couldn't verbally tell anyone what happened, but another handicapped student on the bus told her parent. That parent called police.
Absolutely unfair. The whole thing is ridiculous. My wife would never touch or hurt anybody.
Jack Oney is so upset about the arrest of his wife, Marilyn. He says the 72-year-old has been a bus attendant more than a decade and would never deliberately hurt a child.
She did not do anything to that child. In fact, the child pulled her hair out of her head, scratched her up, pushed her.
But in a detailed report after reviewing surveillance video from the bus, police say Attendant Oney was the aggressor against a nonverbal, severely disabled autistic child strapped in a special harness. Police say the tape shows Oney repeatedly screaming at the child, manhandling him, pushing him, even slapping his arm. And police say the threats of more violence were really disturbing.
She had actually grabbed his hand and pushed his fingers back. And on the surveillance, you can hear her saying or asking him if she wants her to break his fingers.
The only thing she did is take his hands down so he couldn't pull out her hair anymore.
Marilyn's husband claims his wife wears special gear to deal with this particular boy on the bus, but the school district says that's not true, though they do say they've had no complaints about Ms. Oney in the past. She has an unblemished record. According to the report, Oney says she was just trying to keep the boy from kicking the bus driver's seat and poking her and others. But police say they saw it differently on tape. They say people dealing with children, particularly special needs, can't ever lose control.
It's no different than if a police officer has a bad day. They that doesn't give them an excuse to use excessive force.
Now, detectives called Mazzoni this morning, asked her to come in to talk to them again at the Edgewater Police Department. They had a warrant rather for her arrest, and she was booked right there and taken to the jail. We have learned she has since bonded out on $1,000 bond. As for that surveillance video, police say right now it's part of the investigation. It's not being released. Reporting live in New Smyrna Beach, Volusia County, Claire Metz, West 2 News.
So what characteristics do kids with autism have? Well, autism affects 1 in 88 children, and it affects boys more than it does girls. So 1 in 54 boys are affected by autism. They may exhibit a wide range of intellectual and behavioral differences. They may have an abnormal reaction to sound. They may have an abnormal response to objects. They may have abnormal fears. They may be hyperactive or, on the other hand, lethargic. They may show little or no interest in other children their age. They may prefer to be alone. They may avoid eye contact. They may repeat what he or she has heard, perhaps later and out of context. They may use I and you interchangeably, so you're thinking they're talking about themselves and they're really talking about you. They may not respond to familiar people. And they may be aggressive. And they may exhibit temper tantrums. So here's a headline: autistic student assaulted on school bus. Surveillance video shows a bus driver and attendant hit and kick 11-year-old Timothy, a severely autistic student who is strapped to his seat on a Bedford County, Virginia school bus. So obviously we don't use fly swatters on our children or hit them upside the head. That is totally contraindicated to dealing with this child in their behaviors. So what should an attendant do? Structure and routine are important. Inform him or her if plans are going to change. Set a few purposeful rules that are consistently enforced. Get eye contact before communicating. Make instructions clear and simple. Honor communication, whether it is drawing, speaking, singing, gestures, or body language. Sometimes if they're singing to themselves, you need to listen to what they're saying they're trying to communicate. Give positive directions. Minimize the use of don't and stop. Ignore behaviors that don't hamper safety. Give only 1 or 2 word directions to correct inappropriate behavior. Allow a student who may be overwhelmed by noise on the bus to use earplugs or music headphones. Be sure that all requests are given in a quiet, gentle, firm voice. Stop the bus if there is a severe disruption. Provide pictures of expectations of bus behavior for the student. So you could create a little book that shows kids sitting appropriately on the bus, or sitting with a safety restraint on, or using sign language for shh. Or you may actually include actual pictures of mom and dad or the guardian, the teacher, home, school, the bus driver and attendant, and the bus with the bus number. Your best resources are to check with the teachers parents, and behavioral specialists and/or school psychologists. Share problems with your supervisor. You are not alone in figuring out how to best assure a successful bus ride. Our next category is physically disabled children.
Did you go to school? Yeah. Did you have a good time? Yeah. Oh, you went outside? Yeah. Did you ride the school bus? Yes? Yeah. Say bye. Can y'all blow the horn when you get back on? Will you blow the horn? Me, that's favorite part. Yeah, they're gonna blow the horn. Close the door. Ride? Did you get to ride? Drive? You want to drive? Tell them bye. Tell them bye. They're leaving. Tell the bus bye. Tell them bye. Bye. Can you wave? Oh, you blew kisses. All right. Close the door. Say bye, school bus. Did the school bus blow their horn? Yeah. Yeah, did you get to ride the school bus? Yeah. Was it fun? School. You went to school? Yeah. What did you ride home? Did you ride the school bus? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Say bye to the camera. Bye.
Physically disabled students may be above or below average in intelligence. Never make the assumption that because they're physically impaired, that they are also mentally impaired. You have kids that may have cerebral palsy to where they cannot control their motor functions or their speech, and yet they could be extremely intelligent. You may have heard of a man named Stephen Hawkins who is so severely cerebral palsy that about the only thing he can do, they've set up computers now. They'll actually read his mind and be able to type things on the screen. And they have guessed that his intelligence quotient exceeds Albert Einstein. Imagine how frustrating it must be to be that intelligent and be in a body that you cannot control. They may have poor fine or gross motor skills. Fine gross motor skills are those like writing with a pencil. Gross motor skills, walking. They may have other sensory impairments. They may become easily frustrated, as you can imagine. They may have a why me attitude. They may function academically, socially, and emotionally below expectations.
What's up, midget boy? Duck, 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 butthole. There she is. There's JJ. Allie, what you doing? There's JJ. Where's she at? Good afternoon. How are you? Good. Got something. Well, she don't look happy. Hello, baby. Yeah, she can't see. Oh, she looks upset. Hello, honey.
Yeah, that was a rough ride. The air shock's on a little bit. The air ride ain't that great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, sugar butt. Hi, honey bunny. Hi, sugar butt.
Hi, Dizzy.
Hey, honey. Hey, honey. Did you have fun? Huh? Did you have fun, honey? All right, let's get her inside.
So what can the attendant do to assist physically disabled children? Well, treat the student no differently than any other student. Ask teachers about the student's physical limitations. Identify medical facilities and/or firehouses along the route. The magic list, alternatives to punitive discipline. Anticipate trouble and intercede before it's a problem. Give gentle reminders. Distract to a positive model. Inject humor. Offer choices. Give praise or compliments. Offer encouragement. Clarify messages. Overlook small annoyances. Deliberately ignore provocations. Reconsider the situation. Provide renewal time, time for them to settle down and get back to normal. Demonstrate a caring attitude encourage discussion among the children. So our final section is on confidentiality of records. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, is a federal law that protects the privacy of student education records. In general, schools must have written permission from the parent or eligible student, eligible in that he's of age, in order to release any information from a student's education record. All information you receive or generate about a student is part of their education record. Student addresses and phone number information, discipline referrals, videos on the bus, special needs programs and IEP contents, medical records, even seating charts. FERPA does allow schools to disclose student records without consent to school officials with a legitimate educational interest. FERPA recognizes that transporters can have a legitimate educational interest in student information such as student emergency information, information about students' medical needs that may concern the bus driver or attendant, information about students' disciplinary history so that the drivers and transportation officials can make appropriate recommendations or decisions about discipline. FERPA allows school districts to disclose student records without consent to first responders in an emergency. This may be done if the knowledge of such information is necessary to protect the health and safety of the student or other persons. So you have to be very careful. It's necessary to be extremely careful should the opportunity to arise professionally or socially to use a student's name in casual conversation. So if you have a next-door neighbor who has a child that's having problems with a child, say, on your bus, and your next-door neighbor knows that child is on your bus and comes to you and wants information about that child, you have no business giving out any information to your neighbor, because that student's abilities, that student's discipline records, everything about that child is something you must keep confidential. Go a step further. Say you're sitting in the bus driver's lounge and another bus driver is talking about a kid that happens to be on your bus. If that bus driver has no opportunity to ever transport that child, then you have no business telling that driver about anything about that child. Now, if there's a substitute that's going to take the bus, certainly you would share any and all information you need so that that driver can be successful with that child. But if the person is just another bus driver in the lounge, that information must be confidential. It's very important. You can lose your job, the school district can get sued, it can be a real hassle down the line.